From Back to the Future, Footloose, Japanese tech was the sound of the 1980s. The Sony Walkman symbolized Japan's global dominance in consumer electronics. The reminders now found mainly in retro tech collections like this computer museum outside Baltimore.
Sony Walkman hit the market. The original one here is going to use cassettes, and now people could take their music with them.
And if the US had cutting-edge gaming consoles like Atari, Japan had the games. When I was growing up, my parents thought gaming was bad for me, so I spent much of the 1980s looking for every opportunity I could to play Pacman, a Japanese arcade game that summed up that country's brilliance. But while it was dominating the gaming universe, Japan was locked in a trade battle with the US. Whoa! Japan was accused of undercutting American manufacturers with cheaper cars and microchips, while blocking US access to its own markets. The US retaliated with tariffs and import quotas. Uh-oh! It was resolved with the US lowering the value of the dollar and Japan raising the value of the yen, aimed at smoothing out a growing trade imbalance. No, not that way! And yet experts concluded that a protectionist trade battle actually damaged both economies. Oh no! Some experts say that period contributed to years of economic stagnation in Japan, where sustained growth has only recently returned.
It was in the popular narrative that Japan was coming and we would all need to speak Japanese so we know how to say "I surrender" in Japanese. That dissipated because Japan became more of a stagnant economy.
But the parallels between the US trade dispute with Japan in the 1980s and the one with China today are limited.
In those days, in the 80s, when we imposed duties on steel or voluntary export restraints on autos, you weren't hurting your own domestic interests. Now, today, 50% of the value of US imports are intermediate goods and capital equipment, raw materials, things, the purchases of US manufacturers so that they can compete in the global economy. So resorting to protectionism now is much more costly.
As for Japan's world-class gadgets, they were eclipsed by the smartphone revolution and never recovered.
The cell phones have replaced all kinds of gadgets that the Japanese used to make, and the Japanese just haven't been players in that market.
But Japanese cars are world-renowned, and its gadget reputation lives on in movies like Transformers.
It's from Japanese.
While Guardians of the Galaxy just wouldn't be the same without Star-Lord's Walkman mixtape.
Hey!
Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Maryland.